Alright, so I'm Sean Tucker and I'm going to be doing a presentation on hydrogen, the energy of tomorrow. So currently hydrogen fueled vehicles are, there's a few out there. There's the Toyota Mirai, which was expected to lose 100,000 per vehicle sold. These vehicles were actually sold at 70 grand a piece, and they were expected to lose a ton of money due to the fact that it was running on a hydrogen cell, and the materials in the hydrogen cell were so expensive that it was actually make it so there was no profits for these cars. China has actually set up trams and trains and sunk a couple $1 million into these these projects to create a greener public transport. Boeing has actually created a UAV airplane, which actually is fueled opposed by hydrogen cells, but by actual hydrogen fuel. It actually uses two combustion engines that were slightly modified to actually take the hydrogen fuel. Forklifts are actually a very popular demand for the hydrogen cells. The reason for this is the fact that forklifts are usually used inside, and they don't have well ventilated areas, and you can't be polluting the work area with a bunch of greenhouse gases. So the practical use is actually using hydrogen fuel. Another interesting one that's actually adopted hydrogen fuel is rockets. This is based on the fact that the energy density of hydrogen is extremely high. It is actually one of the highest known to humans in regards to fuel. The fact that hydrogen is at room temperature is a gas, so when it actually gets condensed down, the actual space in between the particles can be brought down so small that it actually produces more energy than other fuels. And then the actual lifetime of a hydrogen cell is roughly 7,300 hours, which is the standard lifespan of a car when kept in proper conditions. So, using hydrogen fuel or the hydrogen cells. So hydrogen fuel is actually keeping the combustion engine, but replacing gasoline as the fuel source with hydrogen. This actually requires very few modifications in order to run it on hydrogen. You need to modify the actual engine a little bit to withstand the higher temperatures and change the intake, the percentage of oxygen to the fuel source, so that way it actually burns and explodes at the right, producing the right amount of energy. You're also going to need to have all the pipes and whatnot properly pressurized, because it's now no longer a liquid but a gas, which means it can escape much easier through little cracks and holes. And then a byproduct of burning this hydrogen fuel is water, which is one of the greenest products of fuel source that we actually have. The hydrogen cell, on the other hand, you would actually have to replace the entire combustion engine with an electric engine, and then you are powering this electric engine with a chemical reaction between oxygen and hydrogen, which is also giving you the byproduct of water as the water and heat. So, since they're both running on hydrogen, we have to look into whether it's practical in regards to obtaining this hydrogen. In order to get hydrogen, which is actually found one of the most common elements in the periodic table, but it is never found by itself. It is always joined with some other elements. And the easiest way that we have discovered on isolating hydrogen to get it by itself is using a water and an electrolyte solution and mixing the two, and then running electricity through the water. This will separate the bonds between the hydrogen and the oxygen. And then once that happens, there is heat, so you do have the result of occasional steam. You're actually going to need to filter the hydrogen and oxygen, so that way you only have the gas, and then pump this into a storage tank and separate the oxygen from the hydrogen. So the benefits of hydrogen fuel is that it's compatible with the current vehicle design. Actually, both are. The hydrogen fuel is compatible with the combustion engines, while the hydrogen cells are compatible with the electric vehicles. There are claims that the hydrogen fuel has 100% fuel burn rate, opposed to gasoline, which is less than 75%, which means 25 cents for every dollar of gasoline that you pay for is actually not being used to move you to your destination, but just getting sent out as a pollutant into the environment. Hydrogen is seen as a green alternative due to the fact that the byproduct is water. It is a renewable fuel because it is so common, and we are actually able to we get it from water, and that's what we actually retrieve at the end of this, is the water is back once we actually burn the fuel. There isn't actually a huge environmental damage if it leaked. So the problem with other fuels is that it is actually very toxic, but hydrogen will actually disperse into the environment without any known significant damages as it disperses, as long as there is an ignition source that turns it into an explosion. Many claim that hydrogen fuel is better for the engine due to the fact that it actually burns 100% of the fuel, which doesn't leave all the gunk and grime left to have to be filtered out of or taken out of the engine. The benefits of hydrogen cells is the fact that if you had the same weight of fuel and hydrogen cells as lithium batteries, you would actually have 10 times more energy stored in the hydrogen cells opposed to those lithium batteries. Another benefit is the fact that hydrogen cells run off oxygen and hydrogen, which mean that they have a byproduct of water. They also produce heat. The reaction in the hydrogen cells is roughly 40 to 60% efficient in converting to electricity. But if you capture the heat as well, it becomes up to 80% efficient, which is by far more efficient than running a combustion engine. And another big benefit is that the hydrogen cells, as well as the hydrogen as a fuel source, can be refilled in minutes, which is a big benefit when comparing to the electric cars, which have the issue that you can drive them for a while, but then you have to sit and wait as they charge for a significant amount of time. So the reasons hydrogen is an impractical fuel for energy is that you cannot harvest hydrogen in deposits like you do with gasoline, but you actually have to use energy to create the hydrogen. And the issue with this is that majority of our electricity is generated through greenhouse gases producing methods like burning coal, and then there's nuclear energy, which are not considered green sources to get that initial energy, which is used in order to create the hydrogen or break up the hydrogen from the oxygen in the water, which then you store as hydrogen, and then you either burn it as a fuel source, which isn't very efficient, or you put it through the hydrogen cell, which then turns it back into electricity. So we're actually going from electricity to hydrogen back to electricity, and each time it does that conversion, your efficiency gets worse and worse. Another reason hydrogen is impractical is the fact that you actually need more hydrogen than gasoline to move the same distance. In the quantity aspect, although in hydrogen you are actually able to store more hydrogen in the same amount of area as gasoline, so it makes up for that distance. Hydrogen is explosive. It has a very low ignition energy ignition requirement, which means it can be caught on fire very easily, and then it's very explosive. That combination can make it very dangerous if not controlled properly. Another issue is that hydrogen is very prone to leaking, and this is due to the fact that it actually reacts with the metals from the storage tanks, and in this reaction it makes the metals brittle, which leads to cracks, which leads to the hydrogen being able to escape. Another big issue with hydrogen is the fact that it requires pressurized storage, which means that you actually have to put energy into pressurizing the hydrogen, and then on top of that you also have to store it in a controlled temperature area, which is another area where you're losing energy in these conversions. And then another big issue is that we don't have the current distribution network so that you can actually go drive your hydrogen fueled car and refuel anywhere. It's only in select spots, and the gas industry does not want to give up its hold and all the fortune that it makes off of gasoline. So what's hidden behind the hydrogen fuel cell is that it requires extremely expensive metals to create the reaction. It requires only water in the reaction chamber, and this is an issue because the reaction produces heat, which can produce steam, and then in colder climates you have to worry about ice. If either of these get into the chamber, it does not work. So you have to spend a lot of energy on controlling the temperature in order for your reaction to go. Hydrogen fuel cells also have the issue that the hydrogen fuel is challenging to isolate, so you actually have to use the power. The pressurized storage is still used in the hydrogen cells, which then brings to the issue that it reacts with the metal and can cause leaks. On the other hand, the uses for the hydrogen cell energy will be the fact that you can actually generate hydrogen anywhere. So you can actually have hydrogen refuel stations generating their own hydrogen from green sources. If you want to use wind turbines, water turbines, or solar to generate this hydrogen, which then you can sell, so you don't actually have to worry about transporting it everywhere, and they would have their own source, which would then make it actually a much greener source of energy. And then another practical use would be if you have additional power coming in, like at a cottage with solar panels, and you want to store all this power for when you're actually there. It would be much more beneficial to actually store it as a hydrogen opposed to an actual battery, due to the lifespan and the amount of weight and area that you actually have to put aside to store all these batteries. And that is my presentation. Hope you learned that hydrogen cells and hydrogen energy can potentially be a green energy source, but with the technology that we have now, it is not looking very good.